All right, welcome everybody. So in this video, I am just doing a conversation with Jody Goldsworthy, who is the CEO of Jonathan's House Ministries UK. And for those who don't know, recently I joined the board of directors of Jonathan's House. So I thought it would just be a good opportunity for Jody and I to jump on a video together, talk about domestic abuse against men in general, talk about Jonathan's House, what they offer, and just give everyone a bit of a insight into it. So thanks, Jody.
Thank you, Jared, for having me. It's a pleasure, and thank you for joining our team.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I love what Jonathan's House does, and I think the more people out there doing stuff for men in this kind of circumstance, the better. So, I mean, it's probably a good place to start. Do you want to give everyone kind of an overview of what Jonathan's House actually is?
Okay, so Jonathan's House is more than just a signposting service. We, I set up Jonathan's House, and the plan was to make it as accessible to men as possible. I found that after I left my domestically abusive relationship, there was hardly anything out there, and most of the services out there, you had to go through an MI15 like strategic planning, and then most of it and most of the support was a taboo subject already. And so what I'm trying to do with Jonathan's House and what we're trying to do as a team is to make help accessible and not just to restrict the help. And so within Jonathan's House, we run a 24/7 helpline. I believe we're the only male domestic abuse service that actually runs a 24/7 helpline. And that's because majority of our clients cannot phone us during the day because they're either at work or they've got their partners or wives there, they've got their children there. And men do have egos, we do have pride. And sometimes to reach out for help, we like to do it on our own time. And so the helpline is there, accessible at all times of the day, so a man can reach out. We run support groups in person and online because I find that alongside our counselling services, the support group is another great way of men linking up with other men and finding that actually what they're going through does not make them weird, does not make them out to be a freak, does not strip them of their masculinity. Because actually, across the UK, I think the latest statistic 1.5 million men went through domestic abuse. And we're only helping a small fraction of that, but we're providing a brotherhood and we're providing support out of those support groups. We run self-care workshops where our counsellors will take a lead and look at how to recover from trauma, grief. What does anger look like? What does a boundary look like? Then out of that as well, we now offer a global parenting course, which is run by our other director, Sally. And that includes writing court reports, showing fathers how to be dads to their children after post-separation, after the post-separation abuse, or if they go into a new family and they become a stepdad. How does that look like? And so, and then also, as I've spoken about already, we provide a counselling service, which is not run directly from Jonathan's House, but is run in accordance with other counsellors who are linked to our services. And I trust our counsellors. I believe we provide very good counselling. And so that is a long and short of what Jonathan's House is here to provide.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think, you're saying things that probably to some people who don't know are obvious things that you could provide. But, like you're saying, it's a 24/7 helpline. And if you look at other services for men in the UK specifically, most of their helplines are like 9 till 5. Not on weekends. So exactly, men are at work or they're somewhere they can't make a call. They want to call late at night when they're lonely, when the isolation sets in if they're on their own. Um, but the thing is, as well, is well, Jonathan's House is based in Wales, but it is available to anyone, nationally. So anyone in the UK can call the helpline, anyone can attend the online support groups, etc., etc. So it's not just, focused on Wales only. And
No.
for me, when I was in my abusive relationship, and there was nothing at the time. I looked around. There was no one I could contact. There was no one I could call. I tried to call a helpline, but it was a generic one, and they very much treated me like I was the perpetrator and didn't want to know about it. And I think there's so much power in having a helpline run by people who have experienced it themselves. So that understanding is there. So when guys are calling in, it's not a volunteer who's been trained to kind of, answer questions generically. They're actually getting a proper connection with someone
Yes.
who's experienced it and understands what they're going through. And I think there's massive power in that. And then the support groups, the same thing. There's strength in numbers and that power to just be open and honest because there's no shame. Everyone there's been through it. Everyone there's going through it. So it's actually really powerful, and it's something I try and encourage all the men I talk to with what I do, separately to either attend something like that or reach out. And it's always just a good option to have available. And I think it's just nice that there are things actually for men finally.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And it's what I try to do with our support groups is not to have too much of a structure. And it's most of the men who join up will say, okay, I'm going to sit in the background. I'm a bit too shy. I don't really do support groups. And then as the evening or the afternoon progresses, they'll start to come out of their shell and they'll start to open up and say, actually, what you're saying resonates with me. And then the camera will come on. And so we got one guy who's been coming for about 7 months now. And at the start, he just left an abusive relationship of 18 years. And his social anxiety would not even allow him to leave his house. And so he came onto the support group. He didn't speak. I introduced him to the group, but left him. And now his camera's always off. He's speaking. He's asking questions. He's open, and I think that is so good. I love the Talk Club. I like Andy Mann's club, but I also like the fact that we have no restriction on what the conversations are, and that I think is beneficial to the guys.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just want to come on and talk about the football scores, and that's fine. Sometimes they just want. Sometimes we'll have men coming in who are really angry and frustrated that family court has not gone the way they planned, or the amount of money they're having to spend out to go to a contact center to see their children when when the man is the victim, but they still have to pay up to £180 for an hour and a half to see their own children. And
Yeah.
so when they come into these support groups, they're able to open up and talk about actually this is what I'm going through. And then we could have another guy say, actually, I went through that about 2 years ago, and this is how I overcame that.
Yeah.
And so I find that's really beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I've attended some of the support groups just to kind of listen in and things like that. And I can see that gradual progression, like you say, of the guy whose name is just like an X and his camera's off. And then, a week or two later, his name's there, his camera's on, he's talking, he feels more comfortable, he's opened up. And I've also seen exactly what you're saying. People saying, "Oh my God, I've had a terrible day because I got this letter from Kafkas or whatever," and someone going, "Oh well, actually, I got that, and this is what I did," and then they do that, and it helps them. So while it's not a legal clinic offering legal advice, there's still advice and shared experiences that help people move forward with what they do,
Yeah, yeah,
and just having that is really amazing thing. And I know, as guys, we don't want to talk to people and we want to kind of bottle it up, but being able to talk to people on the same page as you is just mega healing.
yeah, 100%, 100%. And it's funny because when people tell me that men are afraid to talk, when you actually look at it, men won't talk to someone they don't trust. when there is no trust in the room, a man will stay silent, or he'll come across very egotistical, peacocking, because that's what men do. We, if there's no trust, we'll bring small talk into it, and we try to make the environment suit our needs. And but what I'm finding is the men over time doesn't happen straight away. They realize actually this is a safe space, and even when we introduce women into the groups, we do it respectfully. But then they'll see actually these women are friends. They're kind. They're loving, and that breaks the fear that all women are going to be abusive towards them. Because if we're showing them good female role models, and the support group environment allows us to do that, and which I think
Yeah.
is I'm blown away by it. It's one of my best things I get to do on a week is to join the support groups and listen to these guys and just to see how they're progressing. It's amazing.
I think for the broader conversation of domestic abuse against men in the UK and worldwide, it's incredibly important to have female supporters because, as men, we can talk all about the stuff and supporting men. And, when I talk online, I literally just get hit with the misogyny card every 3 seconds. It's, oh, you're a misogynist because you're talking about supporting men. But when women talk about supporting men, they can't get, hit with that card. So it gives a little bit more gravitas to, the talk in some circles. So it's really good to have female supporters and really good for guys to see that,
Yeah,
it's not all women are bad. It's just bad women are bad, bad men are bad.
yeah,
And that's how the world is. I thought something important we should talk about when in the relationship of Jonathan's House and, other male charities is funding because, as we know in the UK, male domestic abuse charities, organizations just don't get any of that funding. That all goes to the women's aid, the respect, the female thing. So how how does funding work for Jonathan's House? How can people help support men? What are the practical things people can do?
yeah. So we've been very blessed. We have been successful in funding applications in the past, um, and we've been very well supported by donations in the past through a crowdfunder. We were awarded £19,990 by the Lottery Community Fund, which went into our support groups and research that we've done. We were also awarded just shy of 15,000, which went into the formulation of our CPD work, and that came through from the government levelling up fund, which was awesome. And that was over here in Pontypool through Torvine. And so but it can be difficult, and we have a lot of big plans for a while now. Apart from that funding, I have been personally funding Jonathan's House at a personal cost, which is fine, because Jonathan's House was my idea, so it needs to be sacrifice. But as you alluded to, I approached the Domestic Abuse Commissioner about 3 years ago, and a representative in our office told me, do not even bother going to the Welsh Government for funding because your service discriminates against women and girls and they will not fund you. And so I found out quite quickly there is no government funding for male domestic abuse services unless you support both men and women.
Yeah.
And so, and I find, and I'm not saying that the women's services are not important, but what I would say is there are not enough male services out there. There's services over here in Wales that say they support men, but they're women's aid run,
Yeah.
and their bias comes through straight away. But they're the ones who are getting the funding from the
Yeah.
government. but the support they're giving to men is not tailored towards men. It's women's aid literature that is used to stop men from being violent or from being a perpetrator. And if you're a victim of domestic abuse, that is not fair. So what we desperately need is funding so that we can create services that are tailored for men, that are not discriminatory against women, but are tailored purely for men. So we do have on our website links to PayPal and other ways for people to donate into Jonathan's House. There are other organisations who I believe that maybe would like to donate into Jonathan's House, such as construction companies, banks, all sorts of areas, and we have ways and means for companies to do so. We have different packages for companies to come on board and help us better support our clients. And unfortunately, when I first set up Jonathan's House, I was very naive. I was all about supporting the client, and my friend said, "So, how are you going to pay for all this? And how are you going to get paid?" And initially, I wasn't really fussed about the money. I was like, "Yeah, I just want to help." But that was naive because actually, when you put a value on something, when you put a money value onto something that you're doing, everyone else is interested. And so, yeah, we do need donations. We need support of our community, which is why we are a CIC, because I believe domestic abuse is a community interest.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think all the links you're talking about, so all the donation links, the contact links, all of those things, if companies want to become like a corporate sponsor or whatever, all of that will be in the description of the video so people can find those there. But it's amazing in this day and age when we're talking about stuff like supporting domestic abuse victims, there'll still be people who jump on social media and say, oh, well, you should do it for free and you shouldn't ask for donations. But how do they expect things to, phone lines cost money and internet costs money and, so that's crazy talk. But, and we know that men's charities get a sliver of what other charities get. And,
Yeah,
and I think the big thing is no one in the men's domestic abuse world is asking for female charities to get less. They just want men's charities to also get more. So they want the whole pot to be bigger,
yeah,
not to take away from anything women get. So, but yeah, I think it's great. And what I found with Jonathan's House, and one of the reasons why I decided to accept the offer to become a director is I found there are a couple of men's charities out there, but I found Jonathan's House is the most proactive in actually doing things to support the end user, which is the abused man. So, some of the other charities, maybe they focus more on media relations or talking to government, but all the while there are men falling through the cracks.
yeah,
And, Jonathan's House is getting those men. They have the call center available, they have the support groups available. So those men who need it are getting that help. And I think that should be the number one thing, that the men are getting the help, and then we try and fight the whole government fight and all of those elsewhere. So I think it's fantastic. And I mean, I know I've only been a director for a couple of weeks, but I've followed Jonathan's House for a long time now, and I think that it's just getting better and better, and the ideas to grow are better. And it would be just my wish that anyone who could support this does.
yeah, yeah. It's true, and it's funny because I see a lot of stuff on social media, and a lot of it frustrates me. You know, I get in trouble sometimes when I'm on social media because I speak sometimes without a filter, and that can get me in trouble. But we have good political support over here in Wales. Welsh Conservatives, Plaid Cymru, Reform. The only party who have not fully supported us yet is the Welsh Labour Party. But we do have support from National Labour, who I've been able to speak to Alex Davis Jones, who gave us her blessing to operate in her town and support. I'm able to provide questions which are asked in First Minister's question time. So, for example, Rail to Refuge, I've asked about the male domestic abuse figures, why they'd been hidden so much. We looked at male suicide rates and how they are linked to male domestic abuse and why the areas. But so we're very, very blessed. We seem to have the right doors open to us here at Jonathan's house. And that's because I've learned a long time ago. I've seen a lot of people sit on the fence when it comes to domestic abuse. They're very loud on social media, but when it comes to the room, they sit on the fence. There is no fence in domestic abuse. And sometimes you need to be prepared to be a little bit bolshy and say, actually, this is not right. This is not fair. What we need is proportionate funding for all services. Like when the government released £3 million into domestic abuse services a couple of years ago, only one men's charity got a cut of that money, and that was Mankind, not Mankind Initiative, Mankind, the sexual abuse charity. I think they got £75,000. All the
Yep.
rest went towards Refuge, Women's Aid, and Respect Helpline, which is fine. But was that proportionate? I would say not.
I mean, we all know that that's not the case, and again, we don't want that 3 million split. What we want is the government to say, okay, here's 5 million, women, here's 3 million, or 2.5 for you, men, here's 2.5 for you. Let's get the services going.
Mm,
But I think we're a long way off that. So until such time, organizations like Jonathan's House supporting the men going through this are critical because, like you said earlier, there's 1.5 million men a year reported that are going
yeah,
through this, and we know men underreport. So there are, massive amounts of men struggling. It's not like there's 10 men, struggling, but even if there were, those 10 men deserve help. But we're talking over a million, and we're talking a suicide crisis that's just rampant,
yeah,
and so many problems related to that that they just really, really needs to be more things for men. I mean, it's baffling the hate that's out there, really. But I understand why and the politics behind it and the stigma and things like that. But it is if you were to change men with any other group, if you said black, lesbian, straight, white, whatever, people would be up in arms. But so long as you say men, it's okay to discriminate against men.
yeah, yeah. The common phrase that's used is male violence when it comes to describing domestic abuse. And I challenge that specifically. So there's Christian organizations and people out there who will use the word male violence, and then they say they're supporting all victims of domestic abuse. But if you're using the term male violence, you're already silencing half the victims that you could have worked with. Because if you're a man, you're going to come for help for domestic abuse, but you're being told it's male violence, you're going to remain silent because you're going to feel like you're going to be accused of starting the violence. And then when you talk about bilateral domestic abuse, the common phrase back is, but she only retaliated because he started it. But in reality, that's not what the statistics show.
Yeah.
And so, and that can be frustrating. I know you find that frustrating as well, Jared, when you post your posts on social media, and you'll even hear men come up and say, "Well, he must have done something wrong to deserve that," and that is
Yeah,
so sad.
yeah. I mean, it's a simple common fact, right? This is not my opinion. This is just I don't think there's anyone who could disagree with this. And if there is, I'd love to meet them face to face. But no one, male, female, nothing, deserves to be
No,
abused. There's nothing you can do to deserve abuse. bad people abuse and they do it to someone, whether it's male or female. So people saying, "Oh, what did you do? Oh, you must have started it." Like,
Yeah,
what a big pile of rubbish. And anyone who thinks that way really needs a re-education because no one deserves that.
no.
So I think there's so much education that is required out there about domestic abuse in general,
Mm,
because I think there's a lack of education around the topic just as a whole, and then specifically around male victims of domestic abuse, breaking the stigma down that men can be abused, that there's no such thing as a stereotypical um, victim. I'm 6'3", weigh 120, do strong man. And when I went into the police station, they laughed at me because they're like, "Oh, get out of here! You must be having us on," kind of thing. And because they take one look at you and think there's no way you can be a victim. But anyone who knows domestic abuse understands it's not about size, it's not about gender, it's about manipulation, control,
hmm
power. So there's a massive amount of education that's needed, but it's a long road, I think, to get there with the world.
100%, 100%. We are getting there. I
Yeah.
have, I have hope.
I have, someone said to me the other day, since I've been doing this work, have I seen any changes? And I said, for me, I think I see changes in the fact that there are a few more men willing to speak up about it. There are more men and women supporters talking about the
Mm.
subject online and on social media and things like that. But in terms of government reform and funding and things like that, we're still really in the infancy of where that needs to go.
Yeah,
But definitely more men talking up. The change needs to come with that, obviously, but it's a step in the right direction at
yeah,
least.
yeah. I think two changes we're looking for is within government, and I'm hoping the new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, who seems to be a bit of more of an advocate for male services, I hope he will have a good impact. I'm a bit skeptical, but I'm hopeful. And also I think media plays a massive role in this. How newspapers report domestic abuse, how journalists report domestic abuse, how TV shows such as Coronation Street, when they did that domestic abuse,
Yeah.
it was very good, but yet again, it showed the man as the perpetrator.
Yeah.
When in reality, when you have a look at the figures, the least abusive relationship is a man on man relationship, but that's not displayed. And even when you go into schools, the new program to go into schools to train boys on not to be abusive. When you see pictures of knife crime, you see pictures of boys on there, and until the media, until the narrative is changed. I remember in the 90s when I used to watch the comedy Friends. There was one episode where Joey was being beaten up by his girlfriend, and every time she would hit him, you would hear the canned American laughter.
Yeah.
When Joey went for help, his friend said, "Oh, it's Big Joey being hit by a little girl." Or when he watched Frasier, when he watched, is it King and Queens, and his wife was abusing him, it was all surrounded by canned laughter. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, I think for men our age, we grew up listening to that, and we feel like if we were to speak about our journey through domestic abuse, we're going to be laughed at. And I think for me, in the back of my mind, when I went through it, I had that canned American laughter in the back of my mind, and that silenced me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I mean, there's so much on even nowadays, especially like content creators on social media. It'll be like a husband and wife, and the husband will look at another woman, and then the next scene he's in on crutches and he's bruised or whatever, like she's beating him up, and it's so funny. But it's not funny. If you did it the other way around, no one would be laughing.
Uh,
So, but I would go one step further. I think there's so much in the media about domestic abuse that needs to change, but I think the general portrayal of men in the media needs to change because you can't read anything nowadays without it being about toxic masculinity or anyone helping men must be labeled as the manosphere or
Yeah,
etc., etc. I mean, I was having a look at the UN Women's website yesterday, and they have a glossary of terms, and it's frightening to men to read these terms. They say a men's rights activist, or someone who supports men's rights, like I would consider myself a men's rights activist, you a men's rights activist. It basically is like linked to the manosphere movement, hates women. You go look at their glossary on their website. It's so distorted the real view of what the world actually is. It's all about this how if a man stands up for men, he must hate women, and
yeah.
that's just not the case at all. But but
Yeah,
it's
my daughters would
yeah,
disagree with that.
yeah,
My
yeah. It's
daughter,
it's
yeah,
uh yeah. My wife, my daughters would definitely disagree with that, and it's just absolutely. Whatever happened to just being good, decent human beings and being kind to each other? But that seems to have gone out the window for a lot of things.
tolerance only works for a subject you're tolerant of.
Yeah, yeah, that is very true. But I think that's really good, Jody. I think we've given people a good overview of what Jonathan's House is, a little bit of a discussion around domestic abuse and men in general. If people do want to support Jonathan's House and the work they do, please check out the links in the video. And I think, we should do more of these talks sometime about specific topics that can help guys understand, from our experiences of what we've been through,
Yeah,
um, just help guys do it. So yeah, thanks
100%.
thanks very much, Jody.
That's all right. Thank you, Jared.